Welcome to Behind the Books with Brandy, the podcast that makes taxes, bookkeeping, and small business finances easier to understand. Now, here's your host, Brandy Bodine, owner of BB Taxes and Notary. Hey, friends. Welcome back to Behind the Books with Brandy. I am Brandy. Today we are talking about notary services. One of those things people often didn't think about until they're already in a hurry. It might be a school form, a vehicle document, power of attorney, or maybe just paperwork that you need for a loan. You never know. And then all of a sudden you need it and you're going, where can I find a notary today? But the best time to understand the notary process isn't when you're standing in front of the counter with that deadline and that document. It's today. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What does a Florida notary do? What do you need to bring? What an apostle is, and what document assistance can look like, and what the limits are. I'm going to keep this all real life because most of us aren't handling paperwork from a quiet office with no distractions. We're going to be handling it between school, pickups, work, dinner, appointments, phone calls, and a kid asking, "Where are my shoes?" And then that's going to be that moment you realize, oh gosh, I know who needs to sign it. They live all the way across town. So let's just make it simple. A notary public is an impartial official who performs authorized notarial acts. In everyday language, a notary verifies the identity of the signer, confirms that the signer is present, and completes the required notarial certificates for the act being performed. Depending on that document and that situation, it can be involved like acknowledgement or maybe even an oath or an affirmation. Just depends what the Florida law permits and if it's a authorized notarial act. Now, what a notary does not do is approve the document, decide whether it's a good deal, or explain to you what legal choices you should make or choose the form that you should be signing. That distinction protects everybody. Let's just use a simple family example, okay? Say your adult son is preparing paperwork for a vehicle transfer. He calls you in a panic because he needs it notarized that day. You tell him to come over with the paperwork. And when he arrives without identification, the document is not complete and the other person whose signature is needed is not with him. Now everybody is frustrated. Now, the notary did not cause that problem. The issue is that notarizations have requirements. The signer needs to personally appear before the notary, either in person or through a properly completed online notarization process. The notary also must be able to identify the signer using personal knowledge or evidence, whether that be a driver's license or other kind of picture ID. And the notary has to complete the certificate that goes along with the document. A person cannot simply hand you a document that is signed and ask you to stamp it later. The signer needs to be there for the notarization. That one fact alone saves families lots of unnecessary running around. If your document requires more than one signature, each person who must sign needs to be present for their own notarization. If a witness is required by the document, please make sure that you understand that before you arrive. A notary is not automatically going to have an extra witness just because you're a notary. Now, here at BB Taxes a Notary, we do have about 3 to 4 extra witnesses that we can pull off property at any time, but you have to bring in that valid identification though. In Florida, a notary certificate also identifies whether the person was personally known or produced that identification. So that identification is where we need that. It's always smart to ask before your appointment if you're unsure what identification will be accepted or if you need a witness. Now let's talk about why there are different kinds of notarizations. One common act is an acknowledgement. An acknowledgement is used when a signer confirms that they've signed the document voluntarily. The signer does not necessarily have to sign it in front of the notary, but they do have to personally appear before the notary to acknowledge their signature. Another common act is called an oath, an affirmation, or a jurat. That's Jurat for those out there. And that is generally used when a person swearing or affirming that a statement is true. It's a different act than simply just acknowledging a signature. You're acknowledging not only that the signature is true, but what is in the document is also true. That is why, as a notary, I cannot decide what kind of notarization your document is going to need. The document may already contain a certificate. The person or agency receiving the document may tell you what is required, or an attorney may direct you. There is no notarial wording, and if you don't know what's needed, that's a legal question for the receiving agency or the qualifying attorney, not a guess for me to make. I know that it can feel very inconvenient when you're trying to finish up something very quickly, but it's better to ask the right person the right questions before the document is notarized than to have it rejected later. Now, here's another question I often hear is, "Hey, can you notarize a copy of my document?" Sometimes the answer is going to be yes, but sometimes Florida state law says no. A Florida notary is able to supervise the copying of documents and attest to the trueness of the copy, but there are limits. A notary cannot attest to the copies of public records or vital records when a certified copy is available from the official custodian. For example, you should not assume that a notary can make a certified copy of a birth certificate, death certificate, marriage certificate, or a court filed record, tax return, or public school transcript without getting it from the issuing agency or official custodian. When in doubt, ask the agency receiving the document what is needed. That can keep you from paying for a notarization that you didn't need or didn't meet the requirements. Now we're going to move a little bit on to apostles because this is where the word gets used a lot and is very much misunderstood. An apostle is not the same thing as a notarization. A notarization is just the act of notarizing or the act that the notary performs. An apostle is an authentication issued for a document that will be used for a foreign country as a part of the Hughes Apostle Convention. In Florida, the Secretary of State pretty much said a competent authority that issues the apostle and notarial certifications that a notary may properly notarize a document when the situation calls for it, but just because you have a notary, we cannot issue the apostle itself. I want you to think of that as a two-step process. First is the underlying document that may or may not need to be properly issued, certified, or notarized. Then is that document going to be used for appropriate foreign county? The Florida Department of State handles the apostle request for eligible Florida documents. If this comes up in real life, more than people actually realize, maybe somebody's going to get married abroad, or maybe a child is going to school in another country, or maybe the family just needs the records for immigration, adoption, work, property, or international businesses. Those moments are very important. And the last thing you need is to learn on the deadline that you have the wrong kind of copy or the document needs to come from an official source. So, if a document will be used outside of the United States, ask early and ask the receiving country, whether it's a school, employer, attorney, exactly what is needed. And remember, please, documents issued by another state or the federal government follow different authentication routes. Florida can authenticate eligible Floridian documents, but cannot issue an apostle for a document issued in another state or for another federal document. Now, I do want to talk to you a little bit about document preparation help with the pro se documents because this is another area where clarity really matters. A person who represents themselves is called pro se. And there are times when someone may need help with typing, formatting, organizing their information, or preparing the forms for other documents. A non lawyer cannot give advice. I'm a non lawyer. I cannot tell you what form you should use. I cannot tell you what to write in those forms. I can even interpret your rights. I'm not going to represent you in court, and I'm not going to make a legal decision for you. That's the bottom line. But what I can do is I can provide notary and permitted document support services, which means I can ask you the questions that would be needed in order to fill out your legal document form, and then I will fill out the form based on those answers. Everything is your legal choice. What is best for you, your family, your business, your property, or court matter. And honestly, that clarity is a good thing. When you're dealing with a divorce or a custody issue or deed or probate matter or, God forbid, a lawsuit, any issue where your legal rights are on the line, you deserve legal advice from an attorney who could actually provide it. But when you simply need a permitted form, support, organization, or typing information that you provide with notarization, that's a different service. Knowing the difference can keep families from relying on the wrong kind of help. And before we get into listener questions, here's your notary appointment checklist. One, bring the complete document. Do not sign it ahead of time. Two, bring a valid identification. This needs to be a picture identification. Three, make sure the right signer comes in person. Four, confirm whether or not witnesses are required and whether or not you need to bring them. Five, know exactly what type of notarial act the receiving party requires. If the document does not already include the correct certificate, let us know so that we can get that for you. If your document is international, start the apostle conversation early. A little preparation can turn a stressful errand into a very quick appointment. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into those questions. Amanda, can I bring a document in that is already signed? Sometimes. I guess that's going to be one of those depending questions. It depends on the type of notarization required. For an acknowledgement, you may acknowledge the signature you made earlier, but you must still personally appear before the notary. Now, if the document requires an oath or an affirmation to be asked ahead, then yes, absolutely the signer needs to be there. So, let's go ahead for Marcus now. It says, can my spouse bring my document for you to notarize if I'm at work? Nope, sorry. The signer must personally appear before the notary or the notarial act. Your spouse cannot bring it in to have me stamp for a later signature. Can I tell you? This one's from Nicole. She's like, and we got three more, looks like. So Nicole wants to know, hey, can you tell me what kind of notarization I need? Nope, sorry. I cannot choose the type of notarization for you or give you legal advice. However, I can help you check the document's wording and then help you have the right question to ask the receiving agency or your attorney if that requirement is unclear. All right, and then I got one from Daniel. Can a Florida notary give me an apostille? Well, okay, so a Florida notary can notarize the eligible document, but the Florida Secretary of State is the only office at time being in Florida that is authorized to issue Florida apostils and notarial certifications. The document will need to be properly notarized before we can submit it for authentication. Okay, so last but not least, I have a family court form. Can you tell me what I should write in it? Ooh, no. I can only provide information permitted on the document support services based on information that you provide. I cannot personally tell you what to write in it. I can't tell you that, well, you have to have 3 days of visitations for your husband and each day has to be, I can't tell you any of that. Um, Now, for legal advice, I do want to tell you go ahead and speak with a licensed attorney. However, friends, paperwork is part of our life, whether it's a vehicle, a business, child school, property, travel, family matters. Knowing what a notary can and cannot do is very important and it will help save you a whole lot of running around. So if you need a notary appointment, whether that's remote online notarization, ID verification, VIN verification, permitted document assistance, or help organizing an apostle request, please reach out to BB Taxes and Notary. I'm going to go ahead and let you ladies and gentlemen go for today. Bye for now. Until next time, remember to stay compliant. Thanks for joining us for Behind the Books with Brandy. Follow the show so you'll never miss an episode. And remember, good records, smart planning, and the right guidance can make all the difference. Until next time.